welcome everyone. It's nice to meet you all again. This week we are taking a different topic than what we have taken ever before, and it is around people. The topic is compliance training in the time of change for community banks and credit unions. And with me, I have a fantastic guest who has been in the industry for many years and can be considered as an expert in this area of compliance training. And we have Justin, and Justin brings over more than 25 years of wide ranging of experience in compliance, training, regulations, particularly in financial services sector. Currently, he is the CEO of Tweezzle, which is a revolutionary way of learning about compliance using most advanced technology. Prior to that, he served as a head of compliance training at Bank of China and GRC Solutions head, North America compliance head for Macquarie Group's head of America's compliance training and JP Morgan Chase's compliance training manager. Justin also worked for FINRA, a US regulator, where he helped examiners university to train examiners on how to perform their functions. Now let's speak about this topic particularly. Compliance training is the process of ensuring that the employees understand all the relevant laws, regulation, internal policies that govern the function of the organization. It also ensures that the people know how and why they need to adhere to them in their work. The compliance training for financial institutions market in the US poised to grow by almost $1.2 billion during 21 to 25 and progressing at the CAGR rate of almost 16%. The market, so this topic is in demand and there is a whole lot of importance given to it. Given this importance of purpose of compliance training is to stay and right by where the laws are changing very rapidly. Let's start with this topic and welcome Justin to this area, which is of interest, particularly of community banks and credit union. And let me start with the first question to you, Justin. With everything that is going on with respect to COVID-19, coronavirus, could you shed some light on compliance training, especially for community banks and credit unions?
Well, Yogesh, thank you. First of all, I'm really happy to be here with you as always. So you think about the COVID environment right now. Is risk declining or increasing, right? That's the first thing that you really have to think about. In my perception, it's increasing. Are people in one location? No, most likely not. They're working remotely in different areas. So is compliance training first and foremost on everybody's mind? Probably not. I mean, is communication on par where it should be when everything was, I would say, normal? Probably not. So really interacting with staff during any environment is key, because if you look at the risk of the organization, it's going to change over time, determined by, let's look at product services offered, rules, regulations that impact various departments of the firm as a whole. So I think right now in this environment, compliance training is not where it used to be. And I think also with this environment, listen, I don't know if we hit the peak pandemic part yet. Yes and no, depending on where you reside in this country. But keeping people abreast of what's going on and the impact of their positions is really important, especially now because the risk is increasing because you're not in a centralized location. So from my estimation is compliance training is not first and foremost. It's not the #1 priority right now for people, but it's something that you have to do in conjunction with all the other changes that are going on in the environment.
Sure, and everybody says everything is an option, but compliance is not an option. Whether you're remote, whether there is COVID, no COVID, maybe supervisors can get lenient a little bit during tough times, but they will come back to you and your staff and everyone better be ready with it. And especially with changing regulations, not just the operations are changing, the regulations are changing also. So it becomes more important for do that. And with that, with these changes, what and why do you think we need a good compliance training program, and what are the I think latest and greatest in this domain?
Well, having a good compliance program really sets the tone for the organization. If you look at compliance culture overall, it does have a tremendous impact because the more you learn, the more you understand, and you apply it to your position, the more efficient you are to spot potential red flags or issues within the organization. And when you look at a compliance training program, measuring the effectiveness of it, you really have to start from scratch. Do you do a thorough needs analysis? Do you take everything into consideration when you plan out for the year? Because you have to be agile in your approach because things change, as we all know. Now, do you look at the risk assessment? Do you have conversations with members of compliance? Do you talk to the business? Has anything changed? Now, all those factors need to be considered into a really good compliance training program and mapped out efficiently. It's not just you look at a risk assessment, we need AML training, we need privacy, so on and so forth. You really have to look at the granular nature of your training so each individual understands where they're at and where they need to be. And every firm's different. You look at that risk-based approach, right? It's not going to be the same routine for everybody. So you really have to examine not only what's internal, but external. So once you have that mapped out and you look at the year, yeah, you're going to have to make changes, particularly in this environment with COVID. And I always look at, when you look at personal development of an individual, right? A lot of people think of soft skills, technology skills. But if you want to make somebody more effective at their position and increase that morale overall, isn't compliance training considered more personal development as well? That part, Yogesh, I'm very passionate about.
Absolutely. And not only that, Justin, when the regulators come for examinations, risk assessment, and if you can show that you do have a comprehensive, well thought of compliance training, you're already giving a lot of marks in that assessment process. You're going to get credit for having a robust, thoughtful compliance training for sure.
Being on the regulatory side, what they look at, what they examine, the individuals or departments as a whole, yeah, you do need a robust compliance training program because that's usually the end result when rules, regulations, policies, or anything's created or altered. You have to educate the staff on what has changed or what's new so they can apply it. So, correct. Yeah, it's really important.
Especially with credit unions and community banks where there is a lot of dependency on human resources, people, it becomes more critical. And let me ask to that note, my next question. What are your thoughts on overall attrition in banking, especially post-COVID? What do you think of the bank's plan of action in these changing environment? And also, is there anything that can be done via training or anything like that to make sure people, processes, and compliance stays intact in this time of changes?
What COVID really taught us, and a lot of us were at home during this whole pandemic, and it's still going on, we got comfortable in our environment. We got comfortable at home. People want flexibility. Obviously, pay is always the first one. Everybody wants solid pay, but people like flexibility because now they feel like majority of people, at least, they could do their jobs at home. Why go in person? I understand the rationale for it, team unity, communications, and all of that, but people want flexibility. And if you look at attrition in banks now, people are looking for new jobs primarily because they want that flexibility and that little bit of that autonomy to work from home or work from anywhere. Okay. So, but I also look at the morale. How are companies treating staff during the pandemic? Were they interacting? Were they making part of the team? It's not so easy when you're working remote. Supervisor's job or manager's job, it's just a lot harder because you got to keep tabs on your staff and figure out what they're doing and what they're not doing. And are they operating 100% as they would in person, now working remotely? I'm going to guess probably not, because of there are distractions at home. There are other things that come up and you have to pay attention to. So, With attrition, you have to look at a lot of different elements and look at what people are going to want and need going forward, not what they wanted and needed before the pandemic.
Sure. Now, one question particularly related to regulatory changes. How are banks, especially community banks, credit unions, really keeping up with these changes? CFPB had a recent publication just yesterday, and how with changing staff, lower staff, and at the same time, regulation changing so fast, what are some of the challenges that you see that community banks and credit unions are facing, especially around compliance training, just to keep up?
Well, one of the important lessons I learned in the corporate environment is get looped into every regulator that's applicable to my organization. Getting feeds, either regardless if it's a new rule, reg, or a comment, you have to take that information in and disperse it out to people in the organization that might be affected. Does this have a training need? Does this need a communication need? So there's usually a point person, well, on top of what I used to do, they used to handle that information. But getting those feeds and being looped into regulators constantly, things are going to change. You have to. And that's what I talked about earlier about being agile with your compliance training program. It's easy to map out the first 6 months, but the last 6 months is going to get altered. So it's really important. And I used to have these feeds from every regulator, some 5, 10, 15, and it used to inundate my inbox. But you know what? I needed to know, and I needed to protect the individuals within the firm. So you got to stay looped in. I mean, it's going to impact your firm. It could impact your firm tremendously from a lot of different sides.
Correct. And proactive training perhaps will help you to manage the processes, select right technology. All those things are embedded into it, right? It's not just knowing the changes, but perhaps how to manage the changes and how to be successful, not just in compliance, but beyond compliance as well.
Oh, absolutely. For example, if there's a rule or reg change, it could impact multiple departments. So say, for example, let's use a hypothetical. I get an advisory or a news alert from CFPB, right? What departments in the organization are going to be impacted? It's not just going to be compliance. It could be technology, as you mentioned. It could be operations. It could be the front office. But sparsing that data out and alerting people that this might impact you, and this could impact the technology we're using, the policies, procedures, all of that, and then having an action plan on what to do with it. If you're going to be reactive, that's fine, but you're going to suffer the repercussions if you don't be proactive and listen to what the regulators are saying and applying it internally.
Sure. All this means is, compliance training must reflect those latest expectations in terms of best practices, changes, and everything, and it should become an integral component of firms' training. And also, there is a lot of partnership that can happen in terms of regulatory changes as well. And I'm pretty sure that Tweezzle is on top of making sure that the industry is aware of all these changes. You have many different modules, short version, long versions. So I think with that, any concluding comment, Justin, on this topic, and we will share some of our contact details while we log off, but any concluding comment, Justin, from your side?
Absolutely. And thanks, Yogesh. It's important. If you want to tick the box, that's fine. You want to satisfy the regulatory requirements and be able to sleep at night, better at night, that's fine. But if you want to do what's best for your organization, you really have to get granular with your training and really look at the retention and also other aspects that people can remember it and apply it. And I've seen a lot of compliance training programs where they throw online training at you. It's very high level. And it's like, okay, great, I'm done. What do I do with it? So you need to take care, not as the firm as a whole, but your staff, the different departments. So getting granular with the training is not difficult. And also think of a topic, any general topic. It's usually applicable to more than one department. If you want to increase interaction or the flow of communication throughout your organization, why not get the back office together with the front office? right? There's going to be overlapping topics, and the communication will be tremendously impacted by it. So I try to be inclusive with any training program that I develop, because it's more than just compliance. It's the organization as a whole.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for those concluding comments, Justin. Thank you for being part of Exa Talk. Everyone, it was a pleasure talking to you this week. Please reach out to Justin or anyone from Exanica. If you have any questions, if you want to learn about what are the advanced technologies being used for training in compliance, we would love to share those. We have some modules around fair lending and many other topics available in the Tweezzle platform as well. But happy to share our insights. Have a great long weekend, and we look forward to meeting with you week after next. Have a good one. Thank you, Justin, again.
Thank
Have a
you.
great long weekend.